Cormac McGovern asks, what do you think about the future of gaming? Wow, where to begin? I guess I'll begin in that I was at pretty much the beginning of video games. My first console was an Atari 2600, and back then it was a joystick with one button, and that was it. And that was called gaming, and the graphics were pixelated. Like if you were a person on screen, like an adventure, that little pixel would represent the character. And I mean, I know games are older than that, obviously Pong and Space War and stuff like that, but I've been in the beginning, and it's been really wild over the course of my life to see games really get more realistic, get more in depth. But also too, it's been really interesting the last couple of years where how do I want to say this? So, up until the Xbox and the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, controllers specifically were starting to get crazy complicated. You can push in on the thumbsticks. There's two types of triggers on the front. You have all these face buttons. You've got these center buttons and it tilts and all this sort of crazy stuff, right? Which, if you've grown up with controllers, adding a couple new buttons every generation is not a big deal. But to someone new coming in, it's really tough. And then you had the Wii come along, and anybody who can swing their hand can play video games. And then you've got mobile games. Mobile games are really wild because there are no buttons, right? You have tilt and you can touch the screen, but it's very back to almost the Atari 2600. I'm pointing to simple Atari games where the challenge is to just make a game fun with very little input from the player. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're kind of at this crossroads where, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, they're really powerful and they've got great controllers, but then you've also got mobile gaming, which everyone's carrying around this little computer in their pocket. What does the future hold? Here's what I think as far as graphics go. As amazing as the graphics are in games, when you look at Uncharted 4 and you look at some of the next gen games that are coming out, they look beautiful. They have grass and they've got this lighting and the smoke and all this stuff. And that's all really impressive, but I do believe that we are still a very long way away from true realistic games as far as the visuals go. And I think that can be kind of hard to hear because they're blowing us away every week, and me included. But I do feel like that last mile to get to truly realistic games is going to take an awful lot of programming power to get there. I mean, think about your eyes, right? I remember looking up what the pixel resolution of your eye is, and I want to say it was like 18 megapixels or something like that, or maybe it was higher, maybe it was much more than that. But then you got to multiply it times 2 because you're seeing everything in 3D, right? And the power to generate that sort of resolution with all of the fidelity of the real world, I do feel like we're, decades off. I think that, 10, 20 years we might be there. So as far as like the technology goes, I do feel like that it's amazing and it's cool and it changes every year and it's awesome. But if we want to get to something like the Oasis in the book Ready Player One, I do feel like that, okay, we've got a couple more decades to be there. As far as games go, though, man, it's such an open question. Games need to be fun and interactive. The one thing I will say is that, kind of being an older gamer, when I was young, I was able to see those little pixels on the Atari and pretend that was a character, or more specifically, even like on the Commodore 64, when you played summer games or winter games, and you had the guy who's running, it looked like a guy. I was able to get into it, and I loved it. But I remember very distinctively my uncle not able to get into it. He was older than me, obviously. He was an adult, and he looked at that and he couldn't get into it. In definitely the last 10 years, though, you've seen a lot of those people who weren't able to get into the older games because of the graphics and the sound and stuff like that. They're now able to finally jump in. My mom is a huge gamer. She watches my videos. She's looking for hidden gems. And that's a real testament. But in the last 5 years or so, she's really gotten into Mass Effect and the Dragon Age trilogy and a lot of the BioWare games. And I think that's because the graphics are better. She can actually see emotion on people's faces, and the stories are more engaging. The stories have real characters, and the dialogue is much better. And there's, it just definitely feels like it's becoming more of a mainstream media. That said, it doesn't necessarily make the games better. And I think, if you are a true gamer like me, you're sitting back going, yes, those are all very cool, but that doesn't necessarily make everything better. There's a reason why I have a game room full of old games, because, those old Atari games are still just as fun today. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So, I don't know, it's this weird thing where I really want to see games get to amazing places. I want to go into the Oasis. I want to put on the Oculus Rift and just get lost in that world, that virtual world where I can do and be anything I want. But I also, at the core of myself, I'm like, but the games have to be fun, and I don't want to just do QuickTime events through the whole thing. I hate that, right? There's watching a movie and there's playing a game, and there's definitely got to be a fine line between that. So, I don't know, I hope that answers your question. It was definitely a very good one. This question was asked by one of my Patreon contributors who also helps support my YouTube channel and videos. I want to thank you very much. In addition to being able to ask me questions like this in a private message board, you also get early access to all of my videos and some other really cool perks. If you're interested in checking that out, please go to patreon.com/MetalJesusRocks.